Hello everyone and welcome to Turning the Table. My name is Merrick and today I'm not only going to review the board game Nidavellir, but I'm also going to answer the all-important question. Is this game for you? Is it worth a spot on your shelf or the time on your table? Nidavellir is primarily a bidding game, with a light engine building element built in. It supports 2 to 5 players, is suitable for ages 10 and up, and the box accurately predicts that each game will take around 45 minutes to complete. It's a competitive game, and it's also relatively light in complexity. The theme of Nidavellir is that the Norse realm of Nidavellir, where the dwarves live, is under threat from the dragon Fafnir, so a mighty army must be assembled to defend the realm. You play an agent of the king competing to hire the strongest army amongst your peers, as scored by points. So how does Nidavellir actually play? This section will not be a comprehensive rules guide, but it will tell you enough so that you get a really good grasp of what it looks like on the table and how it plays out. Hopefully, enough so that you can decide if this game is a good fit for you. The primary mechanic in Nidavellir is bidding. Each player is provided with 5 starting coins, worth 5, 4, 3, 2, and 0. Each round, 3 dwarven taverns are filled with, well, dwarves. Each tavern has a number of dwarves equal to the number of players. There is an exception in the 2-player mode where there will be 3 dwarves per tavern to give both players a little bit more choice and agency. Players must then bid on a tavern by placing a coin face down on each of the 3 tavern symbols on their board. They then place the last 2 coins in their pouch at the bottom of their board. When all coins are placed, the bidding begins. Starting with the first tavern, which is named the Laughing Goblin, players reveal their coins. Whoever has the highest coin gets first pick of the dwarves in the tavern, and so on until all of the players have taken a dwarf from that tavern. Then the process is repeated for the second and the third taverns respectively. There is a little rule regarding these gems that each player has that can resolve ties. The taverns are then filled with renewed dwarf cards from the deck, and the players pick up and rearrange their coins so the bidding can begin again until the deck is emptied. There are actually 2 separate decks, and when the first one is exhausted, then you will immediately start using the second deck until that too is finished, at which point the game ends and the scores are tallied. So score! How do you get points? Well, all of those dwarves that are hired from taverns are added to your army like so, in 5 columns sorted by class of dwarf. This is what will score you points at the end of the game. Blacksmiths score points according to a numerical pattern, so the more you have, the more each is worth. The same is true for hunters, except they score points equal to the number of hunters you have squared, so they start off less valuable than blacksmiths, but after a certain point they can become very score efficient when you've collected enough. So a number of people have probably just lost interest because it's too much maths. Don't worry, it's all done for you because the hunters and blacksmiths have their point value for each number you might have written on your score sheet, so it's easy to track. Then there are the explorers. They're really simple. They are worth the combined value of the point value written on their card when you add them all up. Warriors are exactly the same as explorers, but also if you have the most warriors at the end of the game, you also get points for your highest value coin. Finally, miners score a number of points equal to the number of miners you have multiplied by the number of total points written on all of the miner cards that you have. So this starts off small, but it can escalate to some amazing totals if left unchecked. Nidavellir does have a second mechanic, which is a light splash of engine building. See these starting coins? Well, you won't keep them forever, and this is because of the special ability on the 0 coin. Well, whenever you reveal your 0 coin during a bid, you'll probably have to pick last because, well, you bidded with a really weak coin, but you are then able to reveal the 2 coins you left in your pouch at the bottom of your player board, and then you add the total of those 2 coins together, ditch the highest one, and replace it with a coin from the bank that equals the total of those 2 coins, increasing the value of your coin in total. This provides some really interesting tension. Do you give up on getting good picks from taverns early on to build wealth in your coin pouch? Or do you need to ensure that you are optimizing your picks? There are some cards that roll into taverns that are not dwarves, but are actually chests of gold that can increase the value of one of your coins as well, and this forces a difficult choice. So you're probably thinking, it's all a bit straightforward, you just pick a class of dwarf and force it. Try to avoid clashing with other players and get heaps and heaps and heaps of hunters or miners and then, well, get a lot of points and hope you have more than anyone else. Well, no, the game doesn't really play out like that, and because there's one last set of mechanics. Heroes. When you collect one full row from each class of dwarf, you can select a hero and recruit it into your army. They are powerful dwarves that can either score a lot of points for you, give you a powerful effect, or even count as multiple dwarves for the purposes of scoring. Heroes are good and definitely worth pursuing. They will almost always determine how the game ends to some degree. The final mechanic of note is a little halftime reward for those that have the most dwarves in a given class when the first deck is exhausted just before you move on to the second deck. The player with the most ranks of dwarves in a particular class will get a nifty bonus related to that class, such as upgrading a coin or receiving a gem that means you always win ties during bidding, or even a special blacksmith that's worth 2 ranks. And that is how Nidavellir works. Let's have a quick look at the components and build quality. Nidavellir is not an expensive game and does not have an amazing selection of set pieces, fancy meeples and plastic components. It is pretty basic, and it's cardboard, but it is well made for what it is. The card art is certainly a strength, and the box itself has a really nice finish, if even it's a little bit thin. The cardboard frame that acts as the coin bank does not feel particularly robust, but it does the job very well. The box itself is small and light, which are both bonuses in a world of increasingly and often unnecessarily bulky games, and all components fit easily into the box without having to be disassembled. There are also enough little baggies provided to sort all of the components properly. The rulebook is 23 pages long, which is far longer than it needs to be for a relatively basic game. This is mainly because it uses a whole lot of stepped out visual examples for every element of the game, just so there's not any confusion about the rules. It also includes a description of what each hero does, because these are not directly written on the cards, but only represented by symbols, which, to be fair, are easily remembered once you've played a few times, with the exception of 1 or 2 more complicated heroes. So what works about Nidavellir? This game is certainly fun and accessible. I've played it about 5 or 6 times now with a very diverse range of people, and not a single person has had a bad time. I think this comes down to a few key factors. Firstly, it's easy to understand, so after 1 round even, everyone has a pretty good grasp of what's going on. They understand most of the game's mechanics. It also never feels like you're losing. Even when you get stuck with a dwarf pick you don't really want, it's still progress. It helps you work towards either a higher score or a hero. Being one of those games that scored at the very end, you'll also never feel hopelessly outmatched, as you don't really know who's ahead until the end of the game. And although experienced players or people who like doing math on the fly can get a pretty good idea by quickly counting things up, it's never going to be perfect and it's never going to be that clear. There can be some pretty big swings due to hero recruitments toward the end of the game. I also like how, as you add players, the playtime doesn't have to balloon out to ridiculous lengths. Because you run through the deck of dwarves faster with more players, this compensates for the extra decision-making time. Also, everyone gets to have their turn more or less simultaneously due to the primary bidding mechanic. But it's not all shining gold and frothy beer. There is a dragon on the horizon, and Nidavellir certainly has its flaws. Chief among them, for me, is the setup and pack-up time required for what is essentially a short and light game. You need to sort and disseminate coins, set up the bank, ready the rows of heroes, and then sort all of the cards into the correct piles and all of the coins into the correct bags when you finish. And this is problematic because the game causes everything to get very mixed up when it gets into full swing. While certainly not a deal breaker, it has stopped me from whipping this game out for a quick 40-minute finisher to a game night when I think of all of the setup that I'll have to manage. The game is also a table space hog. For something so light and accessible, it demands an enormous amount of space. This is fine for any dining table. It's not Twilight Imperium, don't worry, but it won't really fit on a coffee table in your lounge very well, especially when playing with 4 or more players. As for mechanics, sometimes Nidavellir can feel like it's over before it really gets started. You just begin to secure a strategy and get the gears turning to line up your dwarves and recruit the heroes you want, and then the last deck is empty and it's the last round. Now this is a matter of perspective, because a quick game is a good game and it means that your actions from round 1 really matter, but just keep in mind that there are probably not enough rounds for long-term strategies to play out. Additionally, heroes not having written on them what they actually do is a little bit irritating. I mean, these cards are never shuffled or randomized, so surely they could have just slipped it onto the back of the card and written it there. Then I wouldn't have to check the rulebook or keep trying to remember and tell new players what everything does. So with all this in mind, is Nidavellir for you? Well, if you want a game that's easy to learn, then this is a good game for that. It works really well for groups that have a mix of experienced and new board game players. The theme is interesting and the heroes all have different kinds of lore written about them, so a player interested in Norse mythology might definitely get a kick out of it, but I'm no expert on the matter, so maybe it's horribly inaccurate, I don't know. The actual theme doesn't really fit into the gameplay much anyway. If you like really deep, lengthy and meaty strategy games, then Nidavellir will likely not satisfy. Yes, there are plenty of chances to strategize and there's no dice, but the bidding is chaotic, and tracking and predicting what other players will bid and making decisions accordingly based on what they might want, what coins they have, what they might do with those coins, it's all exceptionally difficult. There are so many moving parts that short of having an eidetic memory and being Rain Man, you will find that whether or not you get that first pick from a tavern does seem to boil down to a fair bit of luck, especially in a 4 or 5 player game. Now, I have not played this game with younger children as of yet, but I'll cite my credentials as a teacher and claim that anyone from the ages of 12 up should be able to engage quite well with Nidavellir. The 10 plus written on the box might be a bit optimistic unless they are well versed in board games. Ultimately, Nidavellir is a great bridging game, both between players of different experience and also between more meaty games when you want something lighter that still feels like a proper board game. It certainly has an important place in my collection, and I hope this video has helped you determine whether Nidavellir is the game for you. If you like this video, please consider subscribing because we will have plenty more reviews like this on the way, and as you may have noticed, this is the first video on this channel, so if you have feedback, please give us some comments and I'll be able to adapt things going forward. Feel free to comment below suggestions for other games to play and review as well. This is Merrick from Turning the Table, and I'll catch you next time. Hang on, but if the goal is to defend the realm of Nidavellir from Fafnir the Dragon, why is it that only the strongest army is selected? Shouldn't all of the armies be used to save the world? Just don't think about it too much, eh?